And thank you so much for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered, 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Dr. Shakinoni Nichols, and today is Mighty Men Thursday. Thank you guys for joining us. And so we have a very special guest. His name is Torraine Walker. He is I want to say more reporter and an author. And he is joining us here on Mighty Men Thursday. So let me bring him to the stage. Hey, Torraine, how are you?
Good morning. How are you doing? I'm fine.
Good. I can hear you okay. Can you hear me?
Hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good. I always try to make sure, 'cause there are times when technology is technologizing and I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm dealing with that myself.
I should say that. So thank you so much for joining us here this morning. So if you could give just a brief introduction about yourself, what you're doing in the community, where people can follow you, and then we'll get into a topic of your choice.
Well, yeah. Well, hello to your audience. My name is Torraine Walker. I am a writer. I'm a journalist. I'm a content creator. I'm also a brand strategist, and I consider myself a digital storyteller. My background is in journalism, but I moved from mainstream journalism to independent journalism about 4 or 5 years ago. Have a company, Context Media, and I also basically give my commentary on news shows and things like that, and talk about things in the political sphere. You can find me on Twitter, probably more than I need to be, Torrine Walker. You can also go to torrainewalker.com, which is my website, so you can see all the work I do and all my violence.
Okay, nice, nice. So I know that there was an article that you wrote on June 16th, and it talks about how Black America owes you nothing. I didn't know if you wanted to discuss that or if there was another topic you'd like to get into.
No, that's a perfect topic.
Okay.
I wrote the article, yeah, right up before Juneteenth. The title is "Black America Owes You Nothing," and I wrote that in the response from a lot of activists who were out protesting in Los Angeles and in New York and other cities because of Trump's anti-immigration policy. And the reason I wrote it is because there seems to be this automatic expectation that Black um, people should automatically jump onto whatever bandwagon of whatever people are protesting are against the system. And I understand where that comes from because historically, Black people have been the vanguard of social justice movements and civil rights movements. But I wrote the article because we can't really have that without talking about the inherent anti-Blackness in a lot of Latino communities. A lot of people who are all out there and all in for some of Trump's anti-Latino, anti-immigration policies also have a history of making anti-Black statements and saying anti-Black comments in their home countries and here. So I wrote the article to say that before you come and demand that Black people get on your side, you need to deal with the anti-Blackness in your ranks before you expect us to do that. So that's what it was about. And I'd say the response was 50-50. A lot of people loved the article because they felt like it was something that needed to be said. A lot of people had pushback against it because they didn't want to really address those issues, but it got the issues on the table and people are talking about it. So that's why I wrote it.
Yeah, good. And I'm glad you did because sometimes we need to be a little bit uncomfortable to get to the other side, right? Because it is something that needs to be dealt with because, I do have Hispanic people that I know, and I need people to understand that just because someone says the Latin community, it's almost like Latin flatness, like Black flatness. You know what I'm saying? It's like somebody from the Dominican Republic, if you called them Mexican, they would have a whole fit, right? Because it's a completely different country with a completely different culture, even though they are Latin. And to Doreen's point, a lot of these people don't like Black people. Like we are the scum of the earth to them. And,
Hmm.
they're here, and a lot of them are in Los Angeles, here illegally, and they're suffering a lot because people aren't showing up to work, you know? But is that our fault? Is that our cause? I should say. And I'm glad that you definitely brought that up. So, what do you think about what's happening, the aftermath that's happening, like people not showing up to work? construction sites, not full of people. I'm like, well, you ran everybody else off that was there. Now you're going to have to pay them. So what do you think?
Well, no, I mean, tied into what you just said, look, a lot of the manual labor done in this country is done by Latinos, and a lot of them are illegal immigrants. That happens. But I also think while that needs to be addressed, I think something that's being overlooked is the fact that a lot of these people don't get here and they're not able to find employment if it's not for companies who are willing to hire them because they can pay them under the table. They don't have to do any paperwork. And every time you've seen an ICE rate, it's always on the lowest bottom rung of the people who are out there, who are the people who just got here or the people who are working for minimum wage or below minimum wage. You haven't seen a CEO be walked out of an office building yet. And that's where the root of the problem is. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
while we do have to deal with the anti-blackness in Latino communities, if we're talking about the larger economic background for why this is happening, it starts at these companies that are willing to skirt the law to be able to hire these people in the first place, because that's where they're coming in.
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of those things, as consumers, what do we do? Right? Because obviously there are some products that people want and sometimes I won't say need, but a house is nice to have. I'm just saying. And if you're having your house built right now, or if you've bought something maybe in a new development that's coming up, the, people aren't showing up to work because they're afraid of getting deported, right? Okay, great. They're here illegally. Why aren't you reaching out to American citizens that have the qualifications to do the jobs? And it's because you don't want to pay them. You've gotten greedy. And to me, it's more greed than it is really wanting to get the job done.
Well,
I
a
mean,
corporation, especially in the United
mm,
States, the profit motive and the bottom line is always the deciding factor of everything. But in my opinion, it seems like it would make more sense, just from a legal standpoint, just to keep yourself out of a situation, to say that, okay, there are skilled laborers in America who are out of work. There are a lot of black people in America who are out of work, especially for the unemployment rate, if we're talking about black men who could do those jobs. The issue is when you hire an American citizen, there is a lot of paperwork that you have to do, and there is a
yeah.
minimum baseline wage that you have to pay. And even in construction, construction
Mhm.
tends to be even a really good paying job. There's very few construction jobs that start at less than $20 an hour. Now it's hard work, it is backbreaking work, but it is work, and it pays a whole lot better for an American citizen than for somebody who's illegal. And then because then you have to pay in the workman's comp, you have to pay in the unemployment. I understand that, but in the long run, you're getting a worker who is actually, first of all, legal to be here and legal to work. So it really saves you in the long run. But they're looking at the short term profit motive without realizing that eventually, because of these protests and because of the public scrutiny that's on this, eventually you're going to start seeing raids in offices and everything, and somebody's going to get walked out. Now, that's going to happen. Now, in the meantime, wouldn't it make sense to hire somebody who's already here, who's willing to work?
Yeah, 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 and that I guess that's the problem that I have with it because, to your point, we have people here, and it's heartbreaking because they want to say, Americans are lazy, and they're no, Americans are not lazy. Businesses want to pay other people slave labor. They do. They want to pay slavery wages to people, and they don't want to pay an actual salary to an American citizen because you know what that comes with, to your point, workers' comp. They will also have to pay the unemployment insurance if that person, does get unemployed. They're also going to have to pay insurance, right? Just
Hmm.
the medical insurance cost to make sure that those employees are okay. And I'm just like, what is wrong with you? You can pay them as a contractor, right? Where you say, okay, you're responsible for X, Y, and Z, and you're coming here to this job site as an independent contractor, which in my opinion actually creates a better situation for that worker because then they can write everything off, right?
Hmm.
But nobody's
No,
really looking at it that way.
yeah, because again, and it's not just in construction. It's like most of the manual physical labor jobs where you have to put your hand to a tool or you have to physically deal with the public. A lot of these jobs are being staffed by people who are legal because again, it all ties back to the economic motive. It is actually
Mhm.
in the short term, it's economically beneficial for a CEO to hire somebody who doesn't have documentation because one of two things. There's the economic motive, and there's also the fact that you can hire those people to do very risky jobs without fear of them having any kind of recourse because they can't go to the EOC,
Right.
they can't go to the state because the first thing
Hmm.
they're going to do, especially in the climate now, is they're going to be the first place they go is going to be in the back of an ice truck, and they know that.
Right.
Employers
Right.
know that, and they know that they can hire those people, like I said, to do very hazardous jobs, and nothing can really happen outside of the body being there.
Right. And that's the sad part. It's like, okay, when did we start getting back into it? Slavery is okay? Because it's slavery. I don't care how you cut it. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
When you're basically saying that people are expendable.
yeah. Well, I don't want to necessarily compare it to slavery because slavery was far more brutal than what they're dealing with now.
Right.
But I think a better analogy is sort of like before Teddy Roosevelt enacted a lot of the child labor laws in the early 1900s, where you
Mm,
had children working in mills and in coal
right.
mines and things like that, is that sort of thing, where it's like there's
Okay.
no protections, there's absolutely no basis for safety of the worker. And if you get killed in a mine or you lose an arm in a mill, then you just glad to go out there and beg with a cup. That's what we're heading back to. We're heading back to almost like serfdom in this country. And
Mm,
the
okay.
crazy thing about this is, again, if you are an employer, it makes more sense to have a healthy, stable workforce that doesn't have to look over its shoulder. And also,
Right.
it makes more sense for an employer to have stopgaps in place and safety protocols in place. So if something does happen, there's a way out of this situation for a worker. But the majority of people don't care about their workers; they only care about the profit motive and however they can get it. So be it. Unfortunately, that's what we deal with.
Yeah, yeah. And there's also, the regulations that come into play, right? That employers don't want to have to get into. And then to that, it's like, okay, well, let's look at some of these regulations they have. To your point, they do keep employees safe. But to another point, it almost backs up employers to where they're like, I want to just get this done and I don't want to have to go through all of the paperwork. Right. But to your point, until we start getting some perk walks and up to the CEOs, because it needs to fall on their shoulders, not the person that may have hired them, in the HR department, right? It needs to go all the way up to the C suite and they need to start being arrested because it's like at a certain juncture, it falls on your shoulders. You've made the ultimate decision that this is okay to hire people here illegally. Because guess what? The houses still need to be built. The work still needs to get done. So you're going to have to open this up to people that are American citizens and pay them the wages that you're supposed to pay them. And guess what? People can actually understand you when you speak English to them and say, hey, I need this done a certain way, as opposed to trying to explain to somebody who has no idea what you're saying to them and then houses fall apart. I've heard about people's houses falling apart after being built, by the way, by people
Oh no,
that are not here from this country.
no, it's a thing. I've seen situations where normally what happens, they will hire somebody who is bilingual, and they
Hmm.
end up becoming sort of like an
Interpreter.
unofficial, yeah, sort of like an unofficial foreman. It's like whoever's building the
Right.
house will interpret the instructions, then the person who's bilingual will tell the workers and everything, and it kind of goes about like that.
But still, there's got to be a way around this nonsense. But I did want to get your take on the, I want to say he's the nominee for the Democratic Party in New York for mayor, and he actually beat out Cuomo. Now, my conspiracy theory is that they actually put Cuomo in the race so that this person could win, and that it brought kind of like a light to the race. Because if Cuomo wasn't in it, in my opinion, would anybody even know that the mayoral race was even going on, right? For the primary, just my opinion.
Well, New York is one of those states where because there's so much media there, anything that happens politically in New York goes out to the rest of the country, just like California and Florida.
Right.
Um, I don't really necessarily think that's true because I think what happens is the Democratic establishment is very, very concerned with keeping their people in place, no matter what transgressions they may have had. Cuomo is a known entity in the Democratic Party, which is why I think they backed him so much. And I think the fact that Madani, I hope I'm not butchering his name,
Hmm.
won was sort of an upset for the establishment Democratic Party in New York. Because here's the thing: the Democratic Party is in free fall right now. People who are inside the Democratic Party have admitted as such, and knowing how much of a tight ship they keep on information and how much they love to serve the narrative that the Democratic Party is fine. The fact that people are deflecting from the Democratic Party and running away from it and going on, basically going on tour with books saying that we know that Biden was incapacitated 18 months ago, but we kept it pushing. We're rudderless. We don't have any sort of we don't know where we're going. I think they wanted Cuomo in because he would give them some sort of stability and they could build around him. The fact that he won is also a fact ties into the fact that a lot of the Democratic constituency is just tired. They're tired of the status quo. They're tired of the same old, and I think that's why he won. Now, here's the thing. I think what happens is also as much and as much free fall and disarray as the Democratic Party is in, they are very, very good at co-opting grassroots movement. From what I've seen, Mandami sort of like comes from the grassroots. He comes from that sort of tradition of AOC. He's a charismatic person. He has a really strong personality. He reads really well on video. He's really good on the stump, and he's really good in talk show situations. My concern is once he does, if he gets into power, the Democratic establishment is going to send their people to him to start corralling some of his quote unquote more radical points of view. The same way they did with AOC, because when AOC came into Congress, she came in on the wave of the people who were disgruntled because Bernie didn't win. And she brought in the
Mhm.
progressive left of the party. And the minute she walked into the House, the first person to greet her there was Pelosi and Schumer and everybody else to basically get her in line and use her as a figurehead for the rest of the young left. And I don't know. I think people are aware of that because AOC is dealing with that now. A lot of people, she has disillusioned a lot of people, and I think a lot of people are going to have Mandami under far more scrutiny. And the very first second that he does something that steps outside of what he promised in his campaign, I think he could end up becoming a lame duck before he even takes office. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, like I said, it's very interesting because I'm like, he's a self-proclaimed socialist and I was just like, okay, socialism never went well for anybody anywhere. I'm just saying, it
Well,
doesn't.
it depends on how you practice it. I mean, if you, the way the socialist model in Scandinavia works really well, but because they have such a strong social safety net, it's able to work. In a country like the United States, when you have so much capitalist interest here, it can be
Yeah,
tricky, especially in a city like New York. You know,
yeah,
I mean, there's always most governments have some form of capitalism and socialism working one way or
right.
the other. It's just that you can't have too much of one and too much of the other. So it just
Hmm.
depends on what it is. And if you have buzzwords that are running with people, they automatically jump up and they start screaming and everything. We'll
Yeah,
see.
because
I don't know.
he's talking about like free childcare, and I'm like, okay, well, somebody's got to pay for it because nothing is free. So you're either going to have to raise taxes, and people are already overtaxed, right? But there's a lot of things you got to clean up. Like the subway needs to be cleaned up, period. And even the governor tried to put it off on Amtrak, and I'm like, wait a minute. Some You're getting money to clean this up and you're not cleaning it up. It's not getting any better. Like seriously, like something needs to be done. Like I feel bad for New York. It's crazy.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't know enough about New York to really comment on everything going on. I just know as far as like the larger Democratic establishment, um, they're like I said, they're in disarray. It's going to be interesting to see how they introduce him to their system and see what that looks like.
Yeah, yeah, because he was kind of, he's being propped. I won't say propped up as like a rock star in that instance, but that's kind of in my opinion, the way they're doing his campaign, right? Setting
Yeah.
him up in that type of rock star status where people will give him the attention and he's, going viral. Apparently, his mother works with Disney, and so he's done some projects with Disney. So there's, money flowing in from there. So this isn't, in my opinion, yeah, you're grassroots, but you have money. It's kind of like Vivek Ramaswamy, right? Like,
Mm.
yeah, he was grassroots, but he still had $10 million. A lot of people that are grassroots don't have $10 million to get started. Just saying.
Well, yeah, just speaking as somebody who does branding and everything, there is that sort of thing goes a lot farther in politics because you know what did they say? The old joke is like politics is Hollywood for ugly people, and it's like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the people who work
Yeah.
in politics they tend to be bland and colorless and everything like that. So when you find somebody who has sort of like some charisma and cachet, whether it's Gavin Newsom on the West Coast or whether it's
Right.
like even somebody like a Bernie who was older but he still had that cachet because he was riding on the shoulders of the young people, or especially like AOC. just because of the way they look, that's going to carry them a lot further through politics than it will anywhere else, like Obama or like a Kennedy. When you get somebody like that, the parties latch onto them and they put them in that status, because there's so
Right.
few of them in there.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And you would think at this juncture in our political spectrum that people would kind of see past things and really listen to what people are saying and putting forth. But to your point, they get distracted and they get caught up in the looks and the glitz and the glamour and the flashy things. And it's like, okay, really, we're just going to do this shiny new toy situation and not really look at what they're saying and what they actually really want to do. Or like, are you guys really listening to what this person wants to do? It's that part, getting voters to realize, like, yeah, there are consequences to your votes as much as there are, good things that come with your vote, depending on who you vote for.
Well, the other thing too is, and I talk about this a lot of times people see their civic duty as voting and then they go home. And
Hmm.
that's not really on the parties, that's on the individual. And if you really want to affect change, you have to start showing up to things outside of your vote. Um, you know, I think the last time I went to vote, well, I'll give this example. Um, the first time I voted in a presidential election was for Obama. I was deeply caught up in Obama and everything. And I remember getting up at 7 that morning to go vote.
Wow.
My polling place is like 3 blocks away at a school. I walked over there, and the line, by the time I could see it, before I got there, the line was out the door, down out the building, down the street, almost at the end of the block. It took me 2 hours to vote. The
Wow.
next time I voted was in a municipal election, and this was in Atlanta. It was like for city council, whatever. I walked in there like it was like a year later. There was like me, a couple of older white guys, an older black lady, and somebody who was in a wheelchair. Those local elections have far more impact on your personal life and your daily life than presidential elections. But because they're not cat flashy, they're not hip, and people don't pay attention to the issues, people don't show up to them and everything. And that's what I'm saying. You got to do more than that. You got to show up to city council meetings. You got to get petitions. You got to be more of a person that's going to be proactive in your community if your community needs something. People vote and go back home and get on the couch and fall asleep. And that's on the person.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of their hope. And I know that sounds sad, but that's kind of the hope of some of these parties. It's like, okay, we only need the people that are our majority to show up. Because if you don't show up, good for us, right? And, even with the Redemption Party, when we won our election, people say, it's a small town. Yes. And a lot of people didn't show up to vote, but they were just assuming that the Democratic Party would still win because we were a new party and we actually won in that election. We carry the majority in that city now, and I do pray that we continue to carry the majority and take care of that town. But to your point, you can't just look at the federal elections and get mad at the president. Like, why are things happening at the local level? Because that's not his job. It's your mayor's job. It's your councilman's job. It's your commissioner's job. It's your elderman's job. Those are the people that you voted in. Your sheriff is somebody that you vote in. You vote in judges at the local level that actually affect your lives. So you have to get involved in politics as much as people want to throw their hands up and, walk away. Politics is all about you. I'm just
Hmm.
saying it never goes away. Okay, so what closing remarks do you have for our audience on this Mighty Men Thursday?
I would just say get more active. Even if you don't really agree, or even if you're not a fan of traditional politics, at least be aware enough of the issues going on your street, on your block, in your neighborhood, and see what kind of change you can affect there, and see how proactive you can be there. You know what I mean? Because those are the things that are going to deal with you're going to affect your daily lives. And if you live in the city, the majority of people who work in the city council, it's not, you don't have to go through the Secret Service and all these people to get to these people. A lot of these people have emails, they have phone numbers, obviously, and a lot of these people are walking around. Like I'm in Atlanta, our local council people walk around every day. There's ways you can get to people and just ask them what's important, and let them know what's important as well, and just be proactive that way. It's not that difficult. I
Yeah.
think people believe politics has an extremely high barrier, and a lot of times it
Hmm.
does. It's just as simple as walking up and asking.
Yeah. And, a lot of times those individuals are really willing to hear you and listen to you. They really are. To your point, it's not a high barrier, and we need to do better at having more of a conversation with our local politicians and not looking at them as small emperors that can't be touched, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. Now, how do I pronounce your name? Because to me, I pronounce it wrong.
No, it's all good. Everybody does. The way it's pronounced is torn, and the way I tell people, it's like torn, like foreign. Same pronunciation.
Oh, okay, so Torraine. So thank
Hmm.
you so much, Torraine, for joining us here on Mighty Men Thursday. I'm looking forward to having you back, and definitely make sure you guys follow him on X at Torraine Walker. All right, I'll see you
Thank you.
soon. Thank
Thank you.
you. Yes, so I'm so grateful that Torrin got to join us this morning. I really respect just a lot of the work that he does in the community. Just as he said, just a long list of the things he does. So I'll definitely make sure when I repost this segment to add all of the links where you can find him.